Hi everyone, I'm Mike and this is the Sunday Art Show. This week we're doing a little bit of outdoor sketching. In recent weeks I've taken to trying to carry a sketch pad and a sharpie pen with me as often as possible. And when I get the chance, I'm just taking a few minutes, maybe in between appointments or if I'm on my way somewhere, to do a quick sketch of whatever catches my eye. So I happen to be parked here. This is the village of Alphington, which is on the outskirts of Exeter. And off in the distance there, I'm wearing my little head camera, which does have a fisheye lens, so it does distort the perspective somewhat. But off in the distance there is a fish and chip van. And I thought the scene had quite a nice composition with the line of cars going off into the distance. And the fish and chip van adds a little bit of human interest. Hopefully some people are going to come along and get some fish and chips and so on. So I've started with a technique I've used a few times now on these videos, if you're following along regularly. And although we've got a street scene, I've actually orientated my paper. This is just a pad of mixed media paper. I'll put the links to the materials in the description below the video as usual. But I've orientated my pad in a portrait format, and that just makes it easier for me to select the bit of the view that I want to include. Now, the way I often work is to map out the entire composition quite loosely, but in this case I just chose to depict the car nearest to me and then try and scale everything to that to get all the proportions, reasonably correct. So we've already got two of the parked cars popped into place. Very little detail, just some fairly loose but hopefully reasonably precise outlines. So already we've been able to create a sense of perspective. We feel that those cars are going off into the distance. And now the inspiration for the drawing. This is the mobile fish and chip van. I think they're called Scoffers. If you happen to live in the Exeter area, I have had their fish and chips on about 3 or 4 occasions, and they've been excellent so far. So highly recommend them. But anyway, just starting to sketch in the van. Now the Sharpie pens encourage the creation of bold lines. You can, just drag the nib of the pen over the paper very, very lightly, and you'll get kind of a dry brush effect. That works quite well. But in general, I use these pens just for really quick, bold, strong line work. And it forces you not to be too fussy. You've got to commit to making, to putting a line somewhere. And, that can cause mistakes as well as nice bold images, so we'll see how it goes. Now that little shape I've just put there is just the beginnings of a street lamp, not exactly to scale for the scene, so I'm going to kind of rearrange some stuff as we go to see what works. But I just spotted this person coming towards me, this lady walking her dog, so I thought, oh great, that's perfect. I'll just sketch this person in as they're walking towards me, hood up, sheltering from the rain, dog leading the way. And as I drew it in, I realized, I've made her far too small compared to the car on the right. So I've now decided that that's no longer a full-grown lady, that's a child walking towards us, and that's just the way it is. That's one of that's what we call artistic license, I believe. Now the next thing I've done, while I was chatting there, is I've popped in the rest of the lamppost, and had I not just been working so spontaneously, I would not have chosen to put the lamppost going straight into the top of the head of the child there. But having done that, I've got to live with it. I've added a second figure and an indication, just a single line, showing the dog lead disappearing off to the left of frame. So we're starting to suggest there's a world beyond the frame of the painting. Anyway, having done that, now I need to add a key detail to the back of the van. So you won't be able to see it on camera, but it actually says traditional fish and chips. And I feel just including that little bit of text adds a bit of character and a little bit of a connection, hopefully, for the scene. This is what the view is about for this particular drawing. The fish and chip van has arrived, and hopefully in a bit some people will arrive to get some fish and chips, and I'll be able to include them. So having done that, I'm now looking at the more distant background buildings, and there's quite a complex array of roof shapes and chimney stacks going on there, lots of different windows, lots of different angles. But all I'm doing is just selecting a few key buildings just to pick out the key details to make them convincing as buildings, just to, you know, complete the environment that these parked cars and these people are walking around in. And the idea will be to kind of leave a little bit of sky clear above the fish and chip van, so that remains the focus of the drawing. So popped in a few buildings on the right. Now we're popping in a few on the left. And just a few windows here and there. I'm not going to get too fussy about trying to depict every single window. Just enough so that you can read it as being a building rather than just a box. So I've just put in a horizon line there. That helps to suggest that there's a world beyond this street. And with the same kind of idea in mind, just a very, very loose indication of some distant trees there. Now, as I was drawing away, I noticed that the proportions I had on the closest car, they're not quite right, but you know, it still works okay within the context of the drawing. So sometimes you can get away with that stuff, you know. Sometimes you can, unless you're going for like a photorealistic effect, then it doesn't always matter. Sometimes a little mistake like that actually makes things work a little better for the world you've created within the image. Now, a chap has wandered up and he's waiting for the fish and chips, which is ideal for me. So I've just popped a figure in almost silhouette right next to the fish and chip van. And so we've got cars going off into the distance, and also we've got these three figures now. They're helping to create a sense of depth on the left as well. And hopefully that darker figure next to the van, it brings your focus to that part of the drawing. But I decided to add a little bit more detail and a little bit of refinement to this closest VW car we've got here. And so I've just shaded in the soft top canopy with some hatching. And now I'm using some similar marks to just pick out shadows and little key details on the rear lights and on the bodywork, just to give that a little bit more of a sense of depth. So I don't want to add shading and modelling for the entire drawing, but it's just enough to distinguish between the foreground and the more distant buildings and vehicles. So again, we're not getting into any, you know, exact detail. We're just kind of capturing a sense of light and some feeling of how things are on this little street. We've got a nice curved line now for the curb, the edge of the pavement going off, sweeping off into the distance. That helps create a sense of depth as well. And it's really just about kind of scanning the drawing at this stage and deciding, well, what little touches, little finishing touches do I need to include? So a little bit of shadow under the vehicles, especially the fish and chip van. That helps to sit the van actually on the road. A little bit of refinement on that lamppost. And I've obviously just decided, you can see it's raining quite badly now on the windscreen, so I need to just clear the droplets away. Decided to put just a few lines on that distant roof there. Sorry about the bing bong, that was just an email arriving. A little bit of a shadow where that woman converted into a child is walking along the pavement. And then just a little bit of shading on the figure behind her, and a little bit of shading under her hood as well, because obviously if we wear a hood, then typically the upper parts of our face are in shadow. So that's pretty much the sketch done. So they're great fun, these little exercises. There's the finished sketch. You know, sort of thing you can do at almost any time, really. Even if you've got a really busy day, this is the sort of thing you can fit in here and there. So as usual, I'll put a link in the description. So if you want to zoom in, you can follow that link and get a look at the high resolution image. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.